Good day, folks. On this Sunday, it's the time to put on my foreign policy hat. You know, a foreign policy, as a defense intelligence agency from the US put out, Modi government pursued assertive foreign policy in 2020, says US Defense Intelligence Agency. It sure did. It did a great job in China, against China. It made the right moves in the Quad. It made the right moves in the Middle East. It did a lot of those stuff, right? But that same policy now lies in tatters. What was probably the best opportunity India had for this Maitri process that we'd started, right, is turned out now to be our biggest disadvantage because of the poor way we've handled our own domestic politics, our own domestic production, the hubris, the false bravado, and critically, not having any scientific advisors of any worth. And if they were any worth, they were not being listened to at all, folks. So as like Harsh Pant rightly writes, vaccine Maitri is a pragmatic response to the pandemic. But it is important to recognize that global support for India is also a reciprocal appreciation of New Delhi's effort over the last few months. And that's true, right? Where some of the richest and most powerful nations in the world turned inwards and erected barriers, India opened its heart and purse strings as a responsible member of the world community. International relations is a ruthless space. Nations worry first and foremost about their own security and survival, but when the question is of global survival, the lines between national and global inevitably get blurred. India's vaccine Maitri initiative remains a pragmatic response to an unprecedented challenge faces humanity. But now, with Poonawalla having run away to the United Kingdom, India having cancelled all the exports that were committed, this is now coming back to haunt us, right? And he says, to an unprecedented challenge facing method. Debate about India's response to COVID-19 will and should continue with the aim of enhancing India's ability to tide over a similar crisis. It's gotten too bad. For India's response represents a unique convergence of idealism and realism in strategic thinking, where the idealists can point to this as a response to the better angels of our nature. For the realists, this is a way of India saving itself by trying to save the world. But none of that happened. Again, the opportunity was staring in our face, but we kicked it. Well, we just know how to kick a gift horse in the mouth, right? This is what it says. India and the pandemic. Its deficient COVID-19 handling could deal a blow of its big power aspiration. Not long ago, PM Modi boasted the country as the Vishwa Guru, buoyed by the Quad's recent decision to invite India to mass-produce US-made vaccines. Officials crowed about India as being the pharmacy of the world. How swiftly fortunes have turned. Mere weeks later, images of India mass cremations plastered the front pages of international newspapers, cementing India's position as the most dangerous COVID-19 hotspot in the world. Canada, the UK, Australia and others have banned flights from India, and the US is advising its citizens to leave the country as soon as possible, even as it is delivering medicine, PPE and oxygen by military air. That's the stage we've reached, folks, right? Clearly the unfolding tragedy, though sudden and numbing in its scope, was not made in a few days. India's 70-year-old rickety health system and its susceptibility to being overwhelmed was both well known and frequently predicted by public health experts. But the hubris of being the inheritor of an ancient civilization, combined with unchallenged political power and media dominance, allowed the leadership to ignore science and need of governance, creating the conditions for this carnage. So it's man-made, folks. Don't even blame it on karma like we all tend to do, right? All pandemics die out, and the current one will eventually too. But by then Indian ambitions to be a big power and its honor will have to be rescued from the ashes of unaccountable fires now lighting up the night sky. And look and see what's happening is the world's locked up. Nepal decides to close 22 entry points with India aimed COVID surge. That Maitri poor, so we've let Sri Lanka, like I said, we've left Sri Lanka also on the fly, so China to step in. SI, vaccines delayed, says Lanka. But there was this whole teacup storm about the US and India. But you got to hear this, right? Preserving a friendship. The United States was wrong, but it is now helping helping, and India should stay focused. It says media reports and social media. This was not just a support package at stake. The entire relationship and perceptions of the US and India were at stake. Now that's the perception in India. That's the challenge. That perception is created by the hanger-ons, the Soviets, the misinformation given by the Chinese, the Lutyens gang, right? It's just overblown. Right? The good thing is it did not make it sound like a favor, the US, but acknowledged the Indian assistance to the US in its time of need. It is important that not to let the blip affect the relationship and stay focused on what is the core battle, which is COVID, right? Then what do you have? Then you have why Biden delayed offering help to India, and this is important. Jack Sullivan and his Indian counterpart Ajit Doval said additionally that Washington is pursuing options to provide oxygen generation and related supplies on an urgent basis. The statement, which comes after two overnight tweets by Sullivan and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, both indicated the help was on the way, put an end to a period of speculation on whether the US was abandoning India during what may be the worst humanitarian crisis since independence. This concern arose because of the time it took the US to state exactly what assistance it would provide to Delhi after the current cataclysm wave of COVID-19 overwhelmed India's health infrastructure, which is what we are to blame, right? Despite Saki's reassurances, there was an impression created that the Biden administration might not help India. On social media, there was speculation that the bilateral relations between India and the US were strained. A few Indian analysts questioned the reliability of the US as partner and suggested Russia may be a better ally. Like I said, this is the humdrum Indian analyst, right? All wrong. There are three possible reasons for this. America's own unfinished battle with the virus, the deliberative nature of Biden's White House decision-making process, and the understandable desire to avoid a political controversy in the middle of the pandemic in the US. When it comes to decision-making, Biden, who served decades in the Senate for 8 years as Vice President to President Obama, is an institutionalist. He believes in getting feedback and input from different stakeholders before making a commitment to action. Sunday's announcement came following days of intense intra-agency discussions at the highest level involving, among others, officials from the National Security Agency, the Department of State, and the Office of U.S. Trade Representative. Finally, in these divisive times in the US, the administration must be mindful of potential attacks from the nativist America First crowd if it appears to chart a course in the international arena that suggests that it cares more about foreign nationals than its own. You can see that same democracy was in play in India, folks, so don't blame them. Because of look at the Congress and everybody else talking about the same thing, why have we given preference to the foreigners and exports? The good, and I should add expected news, is that the US is doing the right thing in lifting the embargo on vaccine ingredients and sending other critical supplies to India. The surprising thing is that there was ever any doubt or question it would. I never questioned it. And it carries on. Biden pledges US help for India's COVID fight. US says it will provide India with raw material for vaccines. And what I didn't like this was the tone by Chindanal Rajagatta, who sits in the US and should know this is all democratic countries will have this problem. US government jolts into action to aid India after criticism of silence. Harris expresses support for Harris, the kind of stuff used by trolls in India on Harris just shows our color consciousness, folks. This is a true fact. They went after Harris because of her color. We have never been comfortable with the darker shades, as you can see from all the ads that run around for fairness creams. And this was always going to be a problem, right? At the time of writing, Washington has only deployed words and was still getting its act together as national security. So anyway, that's gone and dusted, right? And one of the reasons is, you read what Seema Sirohi writes, and that's important, right? It says America finally feels it. The crisis of confidence, or rather the crisis of silence when India's pain seemed invisible to the US administration, had lessons starting with the biggest one. Public diplomacy matters in times of trouble. Without it, doomsday or worse. The time it took for the massive American ship of state to shift direction and respond with a few words, damage was done. I don't think it was really done. And so Seema Sirohi sitting there to say it, I don't think it's right. Dark scenarios and deep conspiracy theories filled the public square. The most absurd involved a claim that people around Joe Biden were deliberately letting Narendra Modi squirm in the crisis of his own making. That is true though. I mean, the mind was focused. Almost everything India needs was on offer, along with the abundance of sympathy from cabinet members. A way around the Defence Production Act was found. Second, ask the help is not sign of weakness. The pandemic has tested all governments and all systems. No one has come out on top. India needs critical supplies to fight back. Some say the Indian side may not have conveyed the request for medical supplies with the sense of urgency the situation required. How could they? They were campaigning, folks. The US side was sensitive not to go ahead of government of India with offers of help, lest it irritate Modi's image managers. This is what happened. Look at what happens. This is what happens to Modi's image makers. India declines UN's offer to help supply chain. Okay, but this is the first policy shift in 16 years. India open to foreign aid. Okay, to buying from China. Then what do you say? US in mission mode to stem India's surge. This is what Chidanand Rajgatare. Important thing, right? He says the US is pulling out all stops to rush aid of every kind. Vaccines, oxygen, ventilators, therapeutics and personnel, and amid alarms that there could be a worldwide relapse if New Delhi does not gain control of the situation. Mission mode, all hands on deck, round the clock are among terms being used to describe frantic action in Washington to salvage both its reputation damaged by its initial slow response and the situation in India, which is itself being accused of sloppy response where there is immediate piecemeal sourcing and urgent facility life. Okay, US steps up. India's COVID fight gets a much needed shot in the arm. US rushes 100 million worth supplies for India's COVID fight. India is set to get assistance from 40 nations in COVID fight, says government. Germany, US promise urgent aid. Over 40 governments commit to help India with medical essentials, secure all kind of essential, Jaishankar tells envoy. Biden, US will be arsenal of vaccines for the world. It should have been India and the US. Unfortunately, lost the plot. UK diaspora business airlines working to ensure vital equipment reaches India. US pledges steadfast support on vaccine imports. US should grant India special waiver from DPA for vaccine raw materials, says Prabal Samantha. I mean, the Prabal Samantha has nothing to say, really. There's nothing to say. Why? What a good suggestion, as if he's part of the American administration, right? Russia extends support to India. First Russian consignment of COVID-19 support materials expected to reach today. First consignment of US COVID aid likely to reach tomorrow. Germany, Australia to rush equipment to India. Modi holds talks with Japan PM on cooperation COVID fight. UK rushing oxygen concentrators and ventilators to reach Delhi tomorrow. But look at what the Indians are doing. Super rich beat deadline, land in UK in private jets. Plus super rich have led from here to the US, right? But rightly so. China is misusing this situation. India declines China in white to join anti-COVID initiative. Our efforts to engage with neighbors more significant they were. I wish all we had to do was spend money and invest it on production of Covishield. China urges private companies to help India in COVID-19. Well, the private companies, this is the biggest market right now. Why would they not help? All the money that's being made by the scavengers are Chinese companies. Obviously, we are the biggest market. If they don't help us, China itself will collapse, right? It's kind of stupid brainer, no brainer for she, right? And look at what they're dubious. China flight curbs have hit US aid supplies, says Shringla. While they were saying let the companies apply, see what's happening with American companies. US's Gilead to donate 450,000 remittance fee while and all US corporates are sending aid to India. Will help South Asia, says Beijing. China has certainly found a way into the space that India had created. India stresses on boosting O2 supplies and talks with the US, and I am bringing this up because our government, the Attorney General, has essentially told the Supreme Court there is no lack of oxygen. And this is what I was going to say. This is all over the place, folks. And China, look, when it says South Asia, we will help. It says China minister in Dhaka must oppose alliance in region by non-Asia powers. And he's talking about the Quad. And this is what China is all about, folks. Never trust them. And like I said yesterday, I would not trust Russia either, folks. Jai Hind.